Welcome everyone to this think tank. This event occurs at the end of the landmark research reporting process, and after we've gone through kind of a lot of research, spoken to industry experts, put together kind of surveys and analyzed the results and put together the report. We come to this point where we have some findings that we'd like to share. Obviously the report has a lot more in-depth findings as well as recommendations and next steps for different types of players. But for this, the purpose of this think tank is really just to get an open conversation and bring up some thoughts and see how people kind of react to that and ask some questions if you have them. Great. So we'll start off with just a quick overview of Harbor. Marta, if we could go to the next slide. Let's start off with Kaba. Do you want to actually give a quick overview of Kaba, Marta?
I will actually ask if Greg could speak on that.
Sure.
All right. Thanks. Yeah, I can say a few words. So most of you are probably aware of Kaba. I recognize a lot of the names on the call, but I won't take too much time. But essentially, Kaba is an international trade association that focuses on technology in the built environment, from homes to large buildings. And with a little heavier focus on North America, we have a news brief that goes out to 19,000 subscribers every Thursday. We do white papers. We're starting a podcast where we do some collaborative research projects, which this think tank is on. We started this research project last year, and we had 16 funders. And so this if you're not part of Kaba and you want to learn more, definitely reach out to Marta or myself. It's walker@kaba.org or kaba@kaba.org. And looking forward to seeing this think tank presentation that's run by Jamil, Harry, and Daniel, and others from the Harbor team. And so thanks a lot.
Thank you for that, Greg. All right, so I'll give a brief overview of Harbor Research and myself. Harbor Research has been working with Kaba for quite a few years now. We've worked on, I believe, the last 4 or 5 landmark research reports in the building space, as well as a few in the smart home space. We are a research and consulting company that's been kind of operating in the space of emerging technology and smart systems for the past 35 or so years. Most of our work is in kind of either the research bucket, where we support our clients with specific tasks and understanding specific markets, strategies, which are kind of strategy consulting, which is kind of more focused on futuristic next steps and where these companies might take their products and which markets they might enter and why and when. And the Smart Systems Lab, which is more focused on designing and kind of combining different organizations and prototypes together and kind of putting together an ecosystem for that, essentially. So my name is Jamil Mana. I'm a project manager at Harbor Research. I've been with the team for a little over 3 years now, I think 3.5 years, and I've worked with Kaba on the last 3 projects with regards to landmark research reports in the building space. So please let me know if you have any questions, and happy to stop at any point to answer. We'll start off with just a quick kind of, we have a few slides we want to share with some key takeaways, but we'll quickly move into a Q&A where we'll have questions and we'll have our panelists answer. So with that said, we have our panelist, Bernard Clement, on the phone. Bernard, do you want to give a brief background on yourself?
Yeah, thank you. I am Bernard Clement. I'm working with Johnson Controls. I'm a product manager at Johnson Controls, and I currently work in our group, which is called Healthy Building, which was created at the beginning of the pandemic in March 2020. All the building closed, and we figured out at Johnson Controls, how can we help our customer reopen as fast as possible, and that was the task of our group. And I've been 26 years in the industry.
Perfect. Thank you, Bernard. Look forward to kind of hearing some of your perspectives on the questions as they arise. Do we have Brian also from JCI?
Unfortunately, no. This is Chris Lane from Johnson Controls. We had a little bit of a scheduling snafu, so Brian was not able to make it today. If you do need me to chime in, I can certainly do that on behalf of Brian and as well as from Johnson Controls, though.
Well, please feel free to jump in if there's something that interests you or you feel that you want to kind of add an opinion to any of the conversations, and that goes to really everyone on the call. But yeah, the more collaborative, the more useful these calls tend to be. But I appreciate that, Chris. Thank you. Well, good. Okay, so we also have Daryl DeAngelis on the phone. Daryl, do you want to give a background on yourself and EBTRON?
Sure, Jamal. Hi, my name is Daryl DeAngelis. I'm with EBTRON. I've been with EBTRON just about 5 years now. And EBTRON is a manufacturer of airflow measuring solutions. And we're a proud sponsor of this important research study into indoor environmental quality and healthy buildings. Certainly coming out of COVID and going into an age where we're looking at decarbonizing buildings, it's very important that we ensure that when we're trying to save energy, that we're maintaining the building's health in the process, and making sure that the reason why we build buildings is for the occupants that are there. So I've been a contributor. I'm 35 years in the industry, and I'm a contributor to ASHRAE on the 62.1 Ventilation Indoor Air Quality Committee, where I'm a voting member. Also, I just left yesterday, got home at 2:30 in the morning, so maybe a little bit slow. I was at the ASTM meetings in Denver, where they have indoor air quality and ventilation committees that I'm a member of as well. So I'm happy to join this panel and discuss this research.
Thanks, Daryl. And I'm sure everyone's looking forward to some questions, especially around that kind of more regulatory and kind of standards background that you have as well there. Good. Yeah, I think we can move along here, Marta. So just a quick overview on the research project and what we were doing. So really, Harbor Research was commissioned by CABA to investigate healthy buildings and indoor environmental quality. So obviously that's been a topic of major interest since the pandemic, and just trying to understand some of the staying power of these ideas, whether or not buildings are going to invest, what are some of the return on investment categories, as well as drivers of adoption for indoor environmental quality in commercial buildings. And so we looked at a few of the market trends and forces that have been pushing this market forward. We put together a market sizing, as well as looked at some of the emerging technologies within the space. We do have a lot of detail on return on investment, both from a quantitative and a qualitative perspective. We've also kind of aligned that with different building types. So really kind of, for instance, you can think of medical buildings with a specific need for additional ventilation and indoor air quality over different types of buildings because of kind of the sensitive nature of being in a medical building. So we do get into specific detail and map that out across different building types. And we also map out the kind of technology landscape, the ecosystem, and how it all interacts to provide the current state of indoor environmental quality solutions and technologies, but also what could be in store for the future as data monitoring for biomarker data becomes even more powerful. So we take that and put together a set of recommendations tailored to each different type of stakeholder that was on the steering committee, as well as to buildings in general. So that's hardware manufacturers, software providers, as well as services providers. And so we do map that out in terms of a short, medium, and long-term view. So yeah, that's just a quick overview on the project. We do kind of take the steering committee's perspectives into consideration as far as where we take the research and where we spend the time doing that research. So that's one thing that is great about these projects. And so please let us know if you have any questions. There's a lot more information than we can share today. But yeah, that's really the point of having that kind of Q&A, open collaboration conversation at the end. Great. So if we go to next slide. So yeah, as far as the methodology for this research, we did conduct secondary research on kind of the relevant HBIEQ studies that have been done, especially kind of from an academic standpoint. There's a lot of studies on the return and value of different types of technologies, equipment, patterns, solutions, things like that. We also did a series of interviews with end users and experts in the market, people and companies that are providers, as well as kind of with a standard and regulatory background. And we also validated a lot of our hypotheses and findings with our customer or our operator survey, which targeted owners and operators of commercial buildings, as well as the occupant survey, which targeted occupants of commercial buildings, especially those in a position of kind of decision-making power for their site. If we jump along here. So just a quick overview here, and thank you to the steering committee who both funded and helped steer the direction of the research. They joined on a call approximately once a month in order to really kind of direct us in the direction that they would like to see this research be. So thank you to everyone that was on that steering committee.
And Jamil, I just wanted to mention that although this is the steering committee, these are the logos here. We do have one silent funder that we will not be able to mention, but then we also have an additional funder as well, Untitled Controls, who contributed to this project as well. So I do also want to make mention of that.
Perfect. Thank you, Marta. Yeah, so just to kind of put this story into context, IEQ is similar to the proverbial canary in the coal mine, which is an outdated mining tradition. Essentially, they used to have canaries inside of mines in order to test and see whether there's noxious gases being released. Canaries were more sensitive, and so if the canary were to pass out, it would be a signal for everyone to get out of the mine. And so, similarly, IEQ is attempting to protect humans in their place of work and their place of living, and identify when their long-term health is being kind of jeopardized. Obviously not quite in the same way as being inside of a mine, but very similar kind of backstory to that, I think, set context. So one thing to note is that indoor environmental quality is a holistic building management process. It's not only installing the right equipment and getting the right softwares involved. It's also about the patterns, behaviors that the building managers are taking in order to ensure that their occupants are kind of in a safe and healthy environment. To a large extent, this is not something that you'll see in most commercial settings, even now after COVID. I mean, there was potentially, there was maybe the best way of describing it was a moment in time where everyone was concerned about this, but it does seem that a large number of buildings, if they don't have to do anything, seems that they won't. And so outside of hospitals, clinics, and labs, which is just kind of that healthcare setting, there is a lack of attention to the spread of pathogens, the spread of disease and just microbes within the built environment. And so this does leave people vulnerable to the spread of these diseases, which has a number of social and economic repercussions. What we believe is obviously there's a huge role for standards and regulatory committees to be able to drive this forward, but some of the difficulties there come around enforcement and being able to enforce, for instance, indoor air quality. Technology will get us there, in our opinion, and there is, already a lot that can be done with the use of technology to track and monitor from a remote location. But it is something that still needs to be done in order for these buildings to move forward, really, with regards to IEQ. We could go to the next slide. So yeah, as we mentioned, I mean, COVID introduces a number of changes to how we live, and these include remote working, physical distancing, online shopping, general attention to health and population migration. I mean, this is effectively a pretty existential threat for commercial buildings if people tend to if this becomes kind of a long-term trend of people not going into commercial buildings and working from home, or even co-working spaces or anything like that. So it's important that there's a stress on health and wellness towards occupants so that they know that the building is taking care of everything that it can. And this includes, messaging, direct investments, and also just specific kind of visual cues that show that that indoor environmental quality is being considered and that the health of the occupants is prioritized. Great. So this is just a quick view on the technology stack that exists within kind of an effective HBIEQ implementation. You see at the bottom, we have the sensors which are collecting cues from the environment. You have operational devices such as your HVAC, your lighting and controls, elevators, general kind of fire and gas detection systems, all that, which will also include sensors within them. You have your ICT hardware and connectivity hardware that helps you kind of connect to either your on-premise or cloud server. And then from there, you have your software applications and professional services that really help you kind of achieve that value added goal that you were trying to achieve in the beginning by setting up all of the hardware and connectivity. And so it really is about kind of having this full stack, and that's difficult for some buildings, and bundling is generally a good option and a good way forward to help kind of buildings achieve this more holistic approach to IEQ. And as I was mentioning, I mean, these are pretty complex applications of technology when you're trying to really map and monitor every, or not every, but multiple different kind of parameters for indoor environmental quality within a building. It really requires interaction of multiple different systems and softwares, and that can create pretty complex applications that, unless required by government enforcement, are unlikely to be implemented by smaller or medium-sized buildings or those that don't have a lot of spending that they can apply to this. I think one of the last things here I just wanted to mention was around early attention to IEQ. So a lot of people think about a building and then applying certain technologies to make it more healthy. It is important for new buildings to be taking this in consideration in the design phases, as kind of there are a number of benefits that are associated with that early implementation, that early consideration as you construct and develop a building, to include the technologies and designs needed to actually achieve IEQ. I think we can skip this one, just an example of how people or how a building might need to consider IEQ and how it might go about it with regards to developing a system and a process. And as far as enforcement and ratings, we did want to highlight, compliance requirements are obviously the best way forward, but are, a little bit difficult to really kind of enforce. And I'm sure Daryl can tell you a little bit more about that. And then there's also rating systems, which is a little more kind of capitalistic in nature and aims at providing differentiation for a building, saying that, hey, we have a high rating, and so we could garner maybe an increase in rents because we've taken care of this stuff and can prove it through this rating. And so that's another potential path that has succeeded in different areas of the kind of building environment as well as others. Great. So that concludes what I wanted to share and some of the key takeaways. As I mentioned, we have a whole section on ROI and what the benefits are of of IEQ in different settings and different types of IEQ, really, as well as recommendations. So if that interests you, please do reach out to Greg or Marta from CABA. But with that said, open the floor for a discussion, and if anyone has any questions, please kind of include them in the chat, or I don't know, Marta, can they unmute themselves right now?
Yes, everyone can actually unmute themselves if they'd like. And then what we'll do is we'll use the the hand raising as an option, the question box as well, if somebody would like to post any questions there, comments. You could also unmute yourself and speak as well. This is a collaborative discussion, so really anybody can participate. And I think what we could do is we could start with maybe Ken. You raised your hand, so I'm not sure if there was something you wanted to ask or discuss.
Yeah, you mentioned, Jamil, the methods for enforcement of the technologies for improving indoor environmental quality. Have any jurisdictions actually put into place requirements on commercial office buildings?
I'll actually probably pass that to Daryl as just to get this kind of roundtable going.
Sure, I'll take that, Ken. Certainly, there's challenges there. In light of COVID, the current administration in Washington is promoting a clean air and building challenge, and they had an RFI. The Department of Energy had an RFI go out last November, December timeframe, looking to see what they can do. The EPA is not allowed by law to regulate indoor air quality the way it is, and the EPA is typically a political minefield. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do. We currently have these building labeling programs like WELL and LEED that promote, for example, enhanced indoor air quality or better lighting, day lighting, and so forth for IEQ. So those are definitely one way to go. The General Service Administration that regulates all government buildings, which is the #1 building owner in the United States, also has a very effective program towards indoor environmental quality, and they have a very good website as far as their sustainable approaches to reach those comfortable buildings. But that's a challenge that we have. Individuals are powerful sensory beings. We can see and hear things and feel things and smell things very strongly. But each individual is unique, like a fingerprint as well. So we all react differently. Though the problem with airflow, for example, is you can't always tell if you have fresh air. You certainly can't tell if the person standing across from you has a flu, a virus, a COVID, or something like that. So it does make it a challenge, and that's where the members of CABA and our product solutions are going to help this industry.
Are there technologies that actually can measure the pollutants I see a lot of sensors for things like CO2 buildup, but are there sensors that measure viral particulates, for example?
There are some sensors that are in development to measure those type of things, but it's very challenging. It's like a VOC sensor. You have to know what you're looking for in order to measure it. There are some companies that produced aerosols that you can actually stick them in the air, and you can actually measure the airflow or see where the aerosol is traveling and see the effectiveness of filters. UL has a verified ventilation program that uses such a device to do that. But actually determining, the virus load in a space is very challenging.
I will reiterate that. I want to come back on the standards and enforcement. There are, standards are slow to adopt. So this is normal that today there is not a lot of things. But in the International Code of 2024, we're starting to see in the appendix some added requirements that equipment will need to be capable of handling MERV 13 filters. Not requiring to put the MERV 13, but able to handle it when it comes to it. There's also some requirement around demand control ventilation in most of the rooms above 500 square feet. So it's trickling, it's taking time. New York State has expressed the interest to adopting that in 2024. How the code works is it needs to trickle down in every single community. It takes time to be adopted, probably another 3 to 4 years before there's any enforceable code that starts to come down from the COVID era.
I'd also like to add that ASHRAE is working on a new standard right now called 241, which is looking for healthier buildings for viruses and things like that, and what strategy to take forward.
So just to maybe ask a follow-up question myself, you mentioned, Bernard, you think about 24 to 2025 is when you expect some of these regulations to actually start being kind of rolled out. Did I hear that correctly?
Yes. So the International Code of 2024 includes some requirements. It's not perfect. It's a starting point. But then those code needs to be adopted by local jurisdictions, and that's when it becomes enforceable. And as you know, probably, some jurisdictions are still running on the code from 2012, and some are running on the latest. So there's different speed of adoption, different local jurisdictions of different interests, and that's why it's taking time. But the earliest that we could see it would be 2024.
There is also the IGCC, which is based off of ASHRAE Standard 189.1, which includes work with LEED. And the city of Baltimore and counties in that area in Maryland have adopted that, and they're looking at adopting that at the state level. So they'd be the first to adopt something that's beyond the minimum standards.
Perfect.
Have you seen any commercial motivation in places like Broadway theaters or the London Stage, where they think they could attract a bigger audience if they advertise that they're improving indoor air quality in the theaters?
From what I've seen, it's more anecdotal than anything. The area where I've seen the most movement is around hotel, and people now starting to pay attention when they choose hotels. There are some hotel chains that provide criteria for selection at the time of selection of the indoor air quality. So there is some movement. I haven't seen anything other than hotels, quite frankly. Now you do see company that puts label on their door that says this building has gone through a UL inspection that Daryl was mentioning earlier. You do see people that do something, advertise it on the door of the building. What I don't know is if people pay attention to those labels when they get into the building.
And I'd like to point out, one of the important things of this committee, this association, is the fact that we provide solutions to maintain the building and to monitor the building, and that's one of the challenges. Just doing a one-time labeling a building doesn't mean it's going to operate that way after a period of time. So you have to have ongoing solutions and measurement and sensing in order to correctly operate it. In addition to a good maintenance program.
Yeah. And I think I'd echo that. From the survey, we did hear, that a group of people, well, I don't know the exact number offhand right now, but it was a pretty significant group of people just felt more at ease when they had those labels, and when they were able to see them. But it wasn't specifically within that segment of kind of entertainment and shows and all that, but just in general with regards to going out into public destinations. Whether or not also that stops them from going, I don't think we had that specific detail though. Good. Do we have any other questions?
I have a quick question. This is Roberto at Siemens.
Hey, Roberto.
Okay. I'm just wondering to what extent architecture firms are, have this on their radar. Are they, working them? Is there demand by builders for architects to start putting this in their plans, or is this mostly a retrofit type of activity at this point?
I'll give you my perspective based on a couple of conversations, and then maybe Bernard and Daryl can jump in as well. But with the conversations that we had, I mean, it's pretty focused on things like CO2, clean water, some of the more basic kind of expected elements with CO2 monitoring being the big one, and you know, MERV 13 filters. But that's, you know, it's, so there is interest, but it's limited as far as their knowledge of the extent or the holistic nature of the other elements that we've discussed in the report.
Okay, thank you.
Bernard or Daryl? Yeah.
I think you know, where we see interest is the agency that, or organization that push for marking, you know, well leads, and those people are claiming that buildings that are well certified are getting premium on rent, and I think this is where the driver is coming for building new buildings that would be capable of providing this level of indoor air quality. Now, having said that, you know, the question was between existing building and new building. There's so much to be done on the existing building that it's taking most of everybody's attention, and the new building is more anecdotal than a retrofit, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'd like to point out that in many municipalities today, there is a requirement of a certain size building to benchmark energy use. And there is a big push by corporations through their ESG program to decarbonize buildings and existing buildings. And so this is the perfect opportunity to recheck your systems as you're trying to make your buildings more energy efficient, to also make sure that they are healthy.
Yep. Thank you.
Yeah, one thing that we can point out in this, and why ESG and indoor air quality works hand in hand, is we see a lot of spaces where it is overventilated, and we're spending too much energy in those spaces versus the spaces where we've got people that are over occupied, and then we need more air in those spaces. So driven by the ESG, we see a lot of interest in rebalancing the system, making sure that the air goes in the right spaces.
Yep. Thank you.
There's a couple of things in the chat here.
Oh, let's see. Yeah, I guess I'll open it back to the floor to see if we have any more questions.
Jamal, one of the interesting things I saw in the report, and I was very surprised to, is people's attention to water, you know, the water quality, which is, you know, very interesting because, you know, water is something that's been regulated for many years because it was found out that, you know, centuries ago that bad water, biologicals in water were making people sick, and the disease was being transmitted by water. So, you know, having that, the WHO published a document in 2000 says, you know, everybody has a right to clean air in buildings and healthy airs. Though it hasn't got the same attention that water has. It's, you know, as Bernard mentioned earlier, we have a very slow, the building industry is very slow to move, as well as, you know, development of standards and adoption of things. So that's our challenge.
Yeah, and that is interesting. I think it came out more in some of the occupant stuff than the operator stuff, if I remember correctly, and probably has to do with maybe some of the kind of deteriorating infrastructure in the US, and people being warned about, you know, lead in their water, as well as you know, potential kind of pathogens and all that. So I think it's interesting. There is a divide between perception versus reality on what actually exists in these buildings. Oh, looks like we have a couple here. One second.
Yeah, so I'd like to address this question on of CO2. I'm actually doing a presentation of CO2 in about a week and a half at another association meeting, and you know, CO2 doesn't necessarily equal indoor air quality. The ASHRAE has put out a position document that addresses CO2 and indoor air quality. There are many constituents in the air relative that affect indoor air quality. You know, there's VOCs, there's particulate matter, there's many things that could impact you. CO2 is a marker of people, and CO2 is, as a marker of people, it has a direct relationship to the ventilation per person that you are to provide in a building. And it doesn't necessarily, you can't necessarily correlate a CO2 value or a ventilation rate, the number of people compared to a viral load of the people that could be in that space as well. So it's a really challenging metric. It's a metric that can be used to identify if perhaps you may be low on ventilation, or perhaps maybe you have too much ventilation, but it's not an exact metric of you know, all those things, the amount of virus in the air or indoor air quality. You need to have multiple sensors in order to determine that.
That's
And agree. It is a representation of people, and it will never represent any of the pollutants that are generated by the building itself, right? If you could correlate pollutant to people in the building because they bring in illnesses and things like these, maybe you can get somewhere with CO2. And I personally think it's not enough, but it will never monitor the pollutants, formaldehyde, and all kinds of VOCs that are generated by carpeting and other parts of the building. So it's really important to, CO2 is a good start, but it's not enough.
Yeah, yes, and the indicate that the purpose of the minimum ventilation standard for people is to eliminate odor from people, bad odors that are generated from bioeffluents, either through the breath or through the skin. But this, as Bernard pointed out, I mean, we live in buildings today. There's desktop computers or laptop computers in every desk. We have copy machines. We have, you know, a lot of plastic furniture, a lot of manufactured equipment that they're off-gassing quite a bit. And even people now, we use a lot of scenting on ourselves. We have a lot of manufactured polyester plastic-based clothing, and we use stuff in our hair. We use body wash and things like that, and they all contribute to you know, chemicals that are being released.
also the cleaning chemicals as well as.
Yes.
Very good point, Joel.
Yeah.
Yes. That was one of the challenges with you know, the beginning of COVID is you know, there was a concern that it was transmitted by the surface, and so there's heavy cleaning going on, and all these chemicals were releasing into the atmosphere.
Absolutely. And as we kind of get into in you know, this research, it does seem that kind of air monitoring would seem like the priority over surface. Is that fair, or is that kind of you know, just more so it's just a holistic process?
So if we think COVID, it's now obvious that COVID was 90% aerosol.
Yeah.
There's nobody that is doubting that anymore. The challenge is that COVID is one of the potential biological hazard, and others might transmit slightly differently. They're not all equal in that respect. There's always going to be an aerosol component. There's always going to be a fomite component, surface. The challenge is how much is going to be each one of those. And I think we don't know at this point in time.
Yeah.
Or at least I don't know.
Yeah.
You know, I was doing some research recently on hospital-acquired infection, and even in this, that is heavily researched, there is not a really good understanding of what percentage is going through surface and what percentage is going through aerosol.
Right. And it does seem that there are some technological limitations the science right now, as far as our understanding, that maybe in the next 5 to 10 years become a little bit more obvious, and we'll have some tools to monitor and manage that. But it does seem early stages. I think the big trigger was COVID, but there are some serious ROI elements that exist outside of simply just occupant health that also matter to buildings.
I understand there have been cases of buildings that have been closed down, labeled bad buildings. That happened in my area in Boston, in a public building, a new building that evidently the building materials were outgassing so bad the employees were getting sick.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah, I worked in buildings that were brand new, and for the first 6 months we had to leave windows completely open to be able to actually get rid of all the air, and management put some fans at the door to be able to extract all this off-gassing for the first 6 months.
I guess the new car smell isn't that healthy.
No, it isn't. And there's actually additional research. Once a product stops out gassing after a period of time, the plastics break down, and this plastic actually become aerosolized and become a little particulate matter floating around in the air. So you have that to deal with as well.
Yeah, and it really kind of brings up that point I was making earlier about kind of thinking about this from the design phase to make sure that IEQ is being considered. I mean, not being able to really sit in the building for 6 months hurts in multiple ways, and it's just one of those considerations that I think as developers are developing buildings, they're not really thinking about that as much as thinking about getting it completed and sold. But yeah, that was a great question. But
you do start to see some product that are advertised, in particular in the material construction, that do advertise the low emissions that they generate. I mean, in particular, in the flooring space, in the desk space, all those equipments that are brought into the building, there is more and more attention. Previously, if you wanted to have clean product, you couldn't find them. Now there starts to be some resources available to select the right product.
Yeah. I think just speaks to the need for maybe a little bit more education or enforcement as far as using those products.
Jamil, I'm not sure if we want to address a couple questions we have in the question box. We have two from Eric Montabel. I'll allow you to read them out if you like.
I'm not sure. 1 second.
What about people counting technology?
So yeah, we have two questions, Jamil. One is, what about people counting technology? How do you see this playing a factor? And the second, do you think we will see a standard such as reset air be implemented?
Oh, sorry, I was looking at the wrong place. I was looking at the chat.
No worries.
I'd like to say that people counting is, if you want to provide the right ventilation per person and the exact number of people, that is probably the best way to do it. As Bernard mentioned before, where buildings are providing air in the wrong location, if you're tracking where people are in a building, then you can properly provide the right amount of ventilation to the people. And there's many facilities, places where you actually know the people count. Any place, as Ken mentioned earlier, in a theater, for example, you know how many tickets are sold. So you can actually provide the right amount of ventilation, for the number of people there.
Yep. Great. And do you think we will see a standard such as reset air be implemented?
I don't think reset will be the one. I think ASHRAE. This industry is used with ASHRAE, and there's so many good engineers that are working at the problem that I see more the traditional participant like ASHRAE putting out standard and being acknowledged in the code. There's no secret for a standard to be acknowledged. It needs to be enforced. It needs to be recognized by code. If the code is not saying that shall be per that standard, there's no way to enforce the standard. And code system around the US have been very good at pointing to ASHRAE in the past. So ASHRAE is working on it. I mean, Darrell has been talking about it. There's multiple new modification to existing standard and the implementation of this 241 standard that are coming. And I'm more confident that code system will actually point towards those standards than a new reset.
Yeah, but that addresses new buildings, but existing buildings, is a larger challenge.
Yep.
And when the energy standard comes out from ASHRAE, it's adopted by the Department of Energy as the baseline code, and then the states are supposed to meet that requirement by law. But it's a challenge when it comes to existing buildings, and we need to do the same type of thing with indoor air quality and as well as other environmental quality measurements.
Yeah, once a building is built, there is no way to enforce currently additional standards.
Yeah. So open it back up to the floor. We have 5 more minutes, maybe 1 or 2 more questions here. Looks like we have one popped up. How do we benchmark IAQ, just like we benchmark energy usage with Energy Star? Reset Air is the only performance and outcome-based standard for IAQ on the market. Do we need more ASHRAE? ASHRAE will only cover design standards.
Well, I think go back to what I was saying. There was an RFI put out by the Department of Energy and the EPA, to try to see how can we make better buildings, how can we impact existing buildings. So hopefully something will come from that, and Congress will act and everything else. At least in the United States, I can't say what's happening in Canada from that perspective, but that's what we need to do. I mean, we need to have regulatory effect by that. It has to be adopted by municipalities, by states, and provinces.
And I will add, the question says Reset Air is the only performance outcome-based standard for air quality, which is true, but it doesn't address anything related to pathogen. It's only TVOC, CO2, and particulate matter.
Maybe a question on the business side of things. Just wondering, Jamil, what trends you see, or what is the structure right now in terms of how these technologies are getting to the customers? Are they, OEMs going direct mainly? How much do the partnerships play with technology companies? How is this getting to the market?
Yeah, so actually, one of our recommendations is just around bundling to get to the market. Currently, it's very kind of direct from business to kind of building or facilities management teams or really just kind of a development build businesses as well. And so it is pretty direct now, and that's actually one of the weaknesses that we think is slowing down this market, as you know, essentially buildings have to kind of manage each one of these different potential additions or changes or improvements in terms of IEQ separately, as opposed to just kind of approaching it in a holistic manner with one partner or with a bundled set of partners, for instance. And so that is something that's an issue today that we think, you know, obviously it's not, you know, just one size fits all, but I mean, for kind of the 80-20 of it is as I described.
Okay.
Yeah. Guess we'll take one more question.
Maybe just one more quick question regarding hospitals.
Mm-hmm.
So they already have, you know, prior to COVID, already had, you know, certain standards that are higher than other verticals. So is there less interest there for any upgrades than, say, a commercial office? Or I'm just thinking if they already have pretty strict air technologies there and standards, there's might be less interest, or what's going on there?
Oh, yeah, go ahead, Bernard.
So the feedback that I heard from ASHRAE was that people that were working in a hospital did not get sick in hospital, they get sick in the community during the COVID. The feeling is that what is in place in a hospital today is working. It can always be improved, but it's working fairly well. And the weak point seems to be the rest of the community, the homes, commercial buildings, and those places. So I don't think there's no interest in looking at hospital. It's that they're already at the level that appears to be working.
Okay.
Yeah, and hospitals, you know, have to maintain that there's follow-up to hospitals to ensure that they are working, which we don't have in regular buildings.
True.
Thank
Well,
you.
great. Well, yeah, thank you everyone for joining the call and for this great conversation. Obviously, a special thanks to Bernard and Daryl for your insights and for kind of the you know, anecdotes as well that you've provided. If you need to contact the Harbor team, we've flashing up some emails here. You can contact Dan or myself, and then same with Kaba. You can contact Greg or Marta if you need anything from them.